Hi everybody, I am going to talk about the models of rehabilitation. Disability is an important public health problem, especially in developing countries like India. The problem will increase in future due to the increasing trend of non-communicable diseases and the change in age structure with a higher rate of life expectancy. The issues of disability are different in developed and developing countries, and rehabilitation measures should be targeted according to the needs of the disabled with a community participation. In India, the majority of the disabled resides in rural areas where accessibility, availability, and utilization of rehabilitation services and its cost effectiveness are the major issues to be considered. In general, the people living in villages and small towns lack access to basic facilities such as hospitals or schools. Whatever they needed to learn, they learned from their mothers and fathers and older family members. Whenever people had a physical or mental disability, their families and neighbors tried to help them. For example, a child might lead a blind person around the village. Grandmother spent extra time at home teaching a child with a mental disability to talk. The men in the family made a wooden crutch to help a lame person walk. One of the neighbors learned to talk with the deaf people who communicated through signs using their hands. Even if everyone helped, it was still a hard life for people with disabilities. There were things that they wanted to do but could not do. They might get less to eat than other people, especially if they were a girl or a woman. There were problems about finding a wife or husband for them. And even if other people helped, they might also sometimes tease them or be cruel. Sometimes they said they had a strange spirit in them, which made them disabled. But they tried their best to make their living. They learned how to find their way around and how to deal with other people in their village or small town. They had a place there, even if it was not a very good place. Models of rehabilitation began to be established even in the ancient societies. These rehabilitation models enable people to make adjustment to their disabilities and lead life in the mainstream. Persons working in the field of disability are expected to be familiar with the different models of rehabilitation available to those individuals living with disabilities for their inclusion and mainstreaming. At the end of this talk, we will gain adequate knowledge about the meaning of rehabilitation, understand the various models of rehabilitation, and learn the outcomes of rehabilitation. Rehabilitation of people with disability is a process that aims at enabling them to reach and maintain their optimal physical, sensory, intellectual, psychological, and social functional levels. It provides disabled people with the tools they need to attain independence and self-determination. The United Nations organizations defines rehabilitation as a process that includes all measures aimed at reducing the impact of disability for an individual, enabling him or her to achieve independence, social integration, a better quality of life, and self-actualization. Rehabilitation can no longer be seen as a product to be dispensed, but should be offered as a process in which all participants are actively and closely involved. The World Report on Disability defines rehabilitation as a set of measures that assist individuals who experience or are likely to experience disability to achieve and maintain optimal functioning in interaction with their environments. A distinction is sometimes made between habilitation, which aims to help those who acquire disabilities congenitally or early in life to develop maximal functioning, and rehabilitation, where those who have experienced a loss in function are assisted to regain maximal functioning. The term rehabilitation covers both types of intervention. Although the concept of rehabilitation is broad, not everything to do with disability can be included in the term. Rehabilitation targets improvements in individual functioning by improving a person's ability to eat and drink independently. It also includes making changes to the individual's environment, for example, by installing a user-friendly toilet or handrail. Rehabilitation reduces the impact of a broad range of health conditions. Typically, rehabilitation occurs for a specific period of time, but can involve single or multiple interventions delivered by an individual or a team of rehabilitation workers, and can be needed from the acute or initial phase immediately following the recognition of a health condition up to post-acute and maintenance phases. Rehabilitation involves identification of a person's problems and needs, relating to the problems to relevant factors of the person and the environment, defining rehabilitation goals, planning and implementing the measures, and assessing the effects. Educating people with disabilities is essential for developing knowledge and skills for self-help, care, management, and decision making. People with disabilities and their families experience better health and functioning when they are partners in rehabilitation. Let me discuss about the community-based rehabilitation. Community-based rehabilitation is a strategy within the general community development for the rehabilitation, equalization of opportunities, and social inclusion of all the people with disabilities. The primary objective of community-based rehabilitation is the improvement of the quality of life of people with disability or marginalized persons. Equality, social justice, solidarity, integration, and dignity are the key principles of this model. Community-based rehabilitation is not an approach that only focuses on the physical or medical needs of a person or delivering care to the disabled people as passive recipients. It is not outreach from a center. It is not determined by the needs of an institution or groups of professionals. Neither is it segregated and separate from services for other people. Conversely, this model involves partnerships with the disabled people, both adults and children, their families and careers. It involves capacity building of disabled people and their families in the context of their community and culture. It is a holistic approach encompassing physical, social, employment, educational, economic, and other needs. It promotes the social inclusion of the disabled people in existing mainstream services. It is a system that is based in the community using district and national level services. Disability often requires lifelong management. Therefore, activities aimed at enabling people with disability should be community-based as much as possible. Sustainability is the ability of the project or program to continue to address the needs as long as needs exist. The most basic rehabilitation activities can be carried out in the person's own community. A multi-sectoral, multidisciplinary concept of community-based rehabilitation is to be adopted. This concept emphasizes working with and through the community. In response to this conceptual change, community-based rehabilitation is now defined as a community development program. There are some components of the community-based rehabilitation approach. They are: 1. Creation of a positive attitude towards people with disabilities. 2. Provision of rehabilitation services. 3. Provision of education and training opportunities. 4. Creation of micro and macro income generation opportunities. 5. Planning for long-term care facilities. And 6. Prevention of causes of disabilities. The core values of individual dignity, autonomy or self-determination, equality and ethics of solidarity are fundamentals of human rights law that concern disability. To achieve this, there is an increased focus on the participation and involvement of disabled people and their representatives. Community-based rehabilitation is fully consonant with the concept of primary health care. This approach promotes awareness, self-reliance, and responsibility for rehabilitation within the community. It builds on manpower resources in the community, including the disabled themselves and their families and other community members. It encourages the use of simple methods and techniques that are acceptable, affordable, effective, and appropriate to the local setting. Community-based rehabilitation is implemented through the combined efforts of disabled people themselves, their families and communities, and the appropriate health, education, vocational, and social services. Programs of this approach must be flexible so that it can operate at the local level and within the context of local conditions. In the initial phase of community-based rehabilitation process, it is important to identify and understand the current situation and map the existing services, and then to identify with all those concerned what gaps exist and what is required. Only then the type of the appropriate services could be considered by all the concerned stakeholders. This needs to take into account of the feasibility, accessibility, and acceptability issues. None of this can be done without the consideration of resource constraints, financial, facilities or equipment, education, transport, and manpower, including level of skills and competency required to deliver what is necessary. Let me mention about the role of social workers in the community-based rehabilitation. Social workers who are involved in the community-based rehabilitation play an important role in the implementation of the programs related to the rehabilitation. They are usually the main persons in contact with the families of the disabled persons. They are able to act as local advocates on behalf of the disabled people and their families. They can provide continuity of care in the community and the continued supervision of home-based programs. They act as directors of community initiatives to remove social and physical barriers that affect inclusion. These persons provide a positive role model for service users if they themselves have a disability. Professionals involved at the third level of service can be included, but are not limited to doctors, nurses, physical therapists, occupational therapists, counselors, support staff, orthotists or prosthetists and technicians. The basic concept inherent in the multi-sectoral approach to community-based rehabilitation is the decentralization of responsibilities and resources, both human and financial, to community-level organizations. In this approach, governmental and non-governmental, institutional and outreach services must support community initiatives and organizations. Let me mention about the relevant initiatives for community-based rehabilitation, such as social counseling, training in mobility and daily living skills, providing or facilitating access to loans, community awareness raising, providing or facilitating vocational training, facilitating information for local self-help groups and parent groups, establishing disabled people's organizations, facilitating contacts with the different authorities, and facilitating school enrollment. Let me describe the next model, namely the institution-based rehabilitation. Institution-based rehabilitation refers to medical and vocational centers, residential homes, special schools with therapy and nursing care, sheltered workshops and daycare centers, which have been the backbone of rehabilitation services, particularly in developed countries. Many people with disability, specifically those who are with severe mental disorders, remain in long-term residential care and are provided with care and training in such institutions. They are under supervision. Such centers function as referral center for community rehabilitation center. Institutional rehabilitation provides excellent services to address the problems of individual disabled person and is often available only for a small number at a very high cost. Moreover, the endeavor in an institution is often out of context to the felt needs of the disabled person and thus falls short of their expectations. In an institutional rehabilitation program, the community is not linked with the process. Hence, when the disabled person returns home, it may become difficult for him or her to integrate into his or her community. The very concept of institution-based caring solely for the disabled people contradicts the aim of integration. The very nature of the service is one of segregation, and the real work of integration can only seriously begin at the point where rehabilitation in this context ends. It is not the acute medical phase of rehabilitation which may entail hospitalization, but long-term therapy, accommodation, education, vocational training and employment that are the most critical for the successful integration of people with disabilities. In addition, opportunities for social contacts and relationships, recreation and self-fulfillment are needed. If we are concerned about quality and not merely the quantity of life, then it is here ultimately that rehabilitation really succeeds or fails, and it is here that the questions of long-term institutional care or a community or home-based rehabilitation strategy become crucial. Some studies highlight the risks of institutionalization, including the creation of dependency, boredom, and underachievement, low self-esteem, stigmatization, and loneliness. These problems may be reduced by humanizing of institutions, making them more like a home in terms of daily routine and regulation, and also by increasing their openness to families and the community at large by making them less than total institutions. But such changes, particularly when they involve a genuine shift of power to the disabled residents themselves, tend to be resisted by both immediate care staff and the administrative hierarchy. It is commonly believed that institutions can provide better services than home care because institutions have specialist staff, specialized facilities and equipments, special education or vocational training on the premises and so on. But the fact remains that institutional facilities are scarce or non-existent in the rural areas and in most urban areas too. Institutional care may be sought also because it removes the burden of responsibility and the stigma of disability from the family. Let me highlight the critique of the institution-based rehabilitation. In the long run, centralized institutional care is likely to fail as a rehabilitation strategy for independence and integration of the disabled into their society precisely because it separates the disabled from the family, community, and normal home environment. By removing responsibility for the disabled persons from the family and the community, the development of understanding of the disabled person's needs and of his or her capacity to contribute to society is inhibited. It does nothing to reduce cultural fears and beliefs about disability, nor to create a climate of acceptance for the disabled person's return. On the contrary, a family learns to live without the disabled persons and to take over any roles or tasks they might have performed. Removal from the family also reduces the chances of the disabled people themselves learning to cope with their normal environment, both in a cultural and a practical sense. Activities of daily living and those related to productive work are very different in a poor rural setting compared with a modern and urban institution. In short, long-term institutional care is probably the worst possible strategy for promoting integration of the disabled into their communities. It is also, of course, prohibitively expensive as a rehabilitation strategy aiming to reach all the disabled in a developing country like India. Hence, this model is inappropriate. Existing institutions generally suffer from a chronic shortage of funds, skilled personnel and equipment, and are likely to have a poor staff rehabilitation ratio and long waiting lists for admission, and these problems are compounded by the difficulty of discharging people when follow-up services are inadequate. Let me outline the rehabilitation measures and their outcomes. Rehabilitation measures focus on body functions and structures, activities and participation, environmental factors and personal factors. They help the person with a disability to achieve and maintain optimal functioning in interaction with their environment. The broad outcomes include prevention of the loss of function, slowing the rate of loss of function, improvement or restoration of function, compensation for lost function, and maintenance of current function. Rehabilitation outcomes are the benefits and changes in the functioning of an individual over time that are attributable to a single measure or a set of measures. Traditionally, rehabilitation outcome measures have focused on the individual's impairment level. More recently, outcomes measurement has been extended to include individual activity and participation outcomes. Measurements of activity and participation outcomes assess the individual's performance across a range of areas including communication, mobility, self-care, education, work and employment, and quality of life. Activity and participation outcomes may also be measured for programs. The number of people who return to their home or community, the rate of independent living, the rate of return to work, hours spent in leisure or recreational pursuits are some of the examples of the outcome of rehabilitation. Rehabilitation outcomes may also be measured through changes in the use of resources, such as reducing the hours needed each week for support and assistance services. Let me sum up. Rehabilitation of people with disability is a process that aims at enabling them to reach and maintain their optimal physical, sensory, intellectual, psychological, and social functional levels. Rehabilitation can no longer be seen as a product to be dispensed, but should be offered as a process in which all participants are actively and closely involved. Different models of rehabilitation of persons with disability help them make adjustment to their disability and lead their life in the mainstream. Community-based rehabilitation is a strategy within the general community development for the rehabilitation, equalization of opportunities, and social inclusion of all the people with disability. The basic concept inherent in the multi-sectoral approach to community-based rehabilitation is the decentralization of responsibilities and resources, both human and financial, to community-level organizations. Social workers who are involved in community-based rehabilitation play an important role in the implementation of the programs related to the rehabilitation. Institution-based rehabilitation refers to medical and vocational centers, residential homes, special schools with therapy and nursing care, sheltered workshops, and daycare centers, which have been the backbone of rehabilitation services, particularly in the developed countries. In the long run, centralized institutional care is likely to fail as a rehabilitation strategy for independence and integration of the disabled into their society, precisely because it separates the disabled from the family, community, and normal home environment. Rehabilitation outcomes are the benefits and changes in the functioning of an individual over time that are attributable to a single measure or a set of measures. Measures of activity and participation outcomes assess the individual's performance across a range of areas, including communication, mobility, self-care, education, work and employment, and quality of life. Let me sign off here and hope to see you in another session. Thank you.